counsel for the defense? Garrett Mosley said it slow, like he was tasting the words, and then he laughed, head tipped back, gold watch catching the courtroom light, a real laugh that went on a half-second too long. Behind him, both of his junior associates smiled into their legal pads. The bailiff smiled. Somebody in the gallery actually snorted. Imani Caldwell didn't move. 29 years old, charcoal blazer she'd ironed on the kitchen table at 5 that morning, a single manila folder squared against her hip. She stood the way she'd been taught to stand in 100 rooms worse than this one. Weight even, hands loose, eyes flat and patient. Her father sat beside her in his wheelchair, oxygen line looped under his nose, both hands folded in his lap because one of them didn't work anymore and the other one shook. "I represent my father, Mr. Eldridge Caldwell," Imani said. "Under his power of attorney." "Yes, sir." "You represent him." Mosley turned to the judge with his palms open, the picture of a reasonable man asking the room to witness an absurdity. "Your Honor, I've been trying real estate cases in this county for 31 years. I'd respectfully ask the court whether we're holding a hearing or a career day." The laughter came again, lighter this time, scattered. "Now I'm going to tell you something right up front, because I think you've earned it. Everybody in that courtroom, the lawyers, the bailiff, the woman in the back row, nobody had figured out yet. Every single one of them thought they knew exactly how the next 20 minutes were going to go. They were wrong. The papers in that thin manila folder held one question, and that one question was going to end Garrett Mosley's 31-year winning streak before the lunch recess. Let's back up. You need to understand the town first. Quincy, South Carolina, sits in a bend of the Latham River where the water goes slow and brown and the kudzu eats anything but stops moving. 8,000 people, give or take. One stoplight downtown that's been yellow blinking since a storm in 2019. Nobody bothered to fix. The kind of place where the man at the hardware store knows your daddy's name and the man at the bank knows your balance. And somehow, those are the same three families. Caldwell Motor Works sat at the corner of Bream Street and the River Road, and it had been there since 1958. Eldridge Caldwell's father built it with his own hands the year the state was still telling black men where they could and couldn't buy a building. 2 bays, a gravel lot, a hand-painted sign that Eli repainted every spring, whether it needed it or not. For 60-some years, if your truck died in Quincy, you rolled it to Caldwell's. Didn't matter your color, your church, or your politics. Eli fixed it, and if you couldn't pay that week, he wrote your name in a green ledger and waited. He raised 2 kids over that garage, a daughter and a son. The son, Marcus, was the loud one, the one who could talk a bird out of a tree. He enlisted at 18 and came home in a flag-draped box at 23. There's a photograph of him bolted to the wall of the front office, and under it, in Eli's handwriting, the words, "This bay belongs to my boy." Imani was the quiet one. The kind of quiet that makes people nervous because they can't read it and they assume it's empty. It isn't. After they buried her brother, she did the only thing that made sense to a grieving 19-year-old who'd grown up watching her father refuse to break. She took his place. She enlisted. 8 years, 2 deployments, and somewhere in those 8 years the Army figured out that the quiet girl from Quincy had a memory like a steel trap and an instinct for when somebody was lying to her face, and they moved her into the Criminal Investigation Division. She learned to read a document the way a surgeon reads an X-ray. She learned chain of custody, evidence handling, how a forged signature betrays itself in the pressure of the pen. She learned how to walk into a room full of men who outranked her and stay calm while the floor moved. She did not learn it to use it on her own family. But here we are. Eli's diabetes took the sight in his right eye in 2021 and most of the left by the spring of 2023. A stroke that same fall took the strength out of his right hand, the writing hand, the wrench hand, the hand that signed 60 years of green ledgers. He learned to scrawl his name left-handed at 74 years old, slow and crooked, like a child. He kept the garage open anyway, working by feel, his apprentice Otis Greer's grandson reading him the labels. And across town, a man named Sutter Holt was looking at a map. Holt ran Riverbend Holdings, the biggest development outfit between Columbia and the coast. He had a plan for the Bend and the Latham condos, a marina, a river walk with little shops that sold candles. The renderings hung in the Chamber of Commerce. There was just one corner he didn't own, a gravel lot, a garage with a hand-painted sign. Garrett Mosley was the man Holt paid to make corners like that disappear. 31 years. He hadn't lost a property case in this county since the second Bush administration. He had a way of arriving at a problem with a contract already written and a notary already paid, and the problem usually understood real quick. The fighting cost more than folding. The letter came on a Thursday. Certified, signature required. Eli couldn't read it, so Otis read it to him on the office stool while a Buick idled in the bay. Riverbend Holdings was foreclosing on Caldwell Motorworks. According to the letter, Eldridge Caldwell had taken out a $90,000 commercial loan against the property in March of 2024 and pledged the garage as collateral. He'd defaulted. Riverbend, having purchased the note, was calling it. Ellie set down his coffee with his good bad hand and missed the edge of the desk. The cup rolled off and broke. "I never borrowed a dime from anybody in my life," he said. "Son, I never signed that." Otis called Imani in Fort Liberty that night. She was out by the end of the month. Terminal leave, 8 years done, a duffel bag and a folder of separation papers. She drove 11 hours straight and got to Quincy at 4 in the morning. And the garage light was on, and her father was sitting in the dark front office under her dead brother's photograph, holding that letter in two hands that couldn't read it. If you're thinking this is one of those stories where the old man loses everything and the developer puts up his candle shops, stay with me. Because what that quiet woman did over the next 19 days is the reason I'm telling you this at all. Imani did what she'd done 100 times in 100 case files. She started with the document. She drove to the county clerk's office Monday morning and paid $4 for a certified copy of the recorded mortgage. She sat in her truck in the parking lot and read it the way the Army taught her. Not for the story it told, but for the seams. The loan was dated March 11, 2024. The signature at the bottom said Eldridge T. Caldwell in a clean, looping cursive that leaned hard to the right. Confident. Even pressure. The signature of a man with a steady, dominant right hand. Her father hadn't used his right hand since the fall of 2023. She sat very still for a moment. Then she kept reading, because in her experience, a forger who lies once lies twice, and the second lie is always the one that hangs him. The mortgage had been notarized. The seal belonged to a notary public named Curtis Pell, Latham County. The acknowledgement line said Pell had personally witnessed Eldridge Caldwell sign the document and verified his identity on March 11, 2024. Imani wrote the name in the small green notebook she still carried out of habit. Curtis Pell. Then she drove home and pulled up the South Carolina Secretary of State's notary database on her father's ancient desktop computer, the one that took 3 minutes to wake up and screamed if you opened too many tabs. Curtis Pell, Latham County, Notary Commission revoked, effective August 2, 2023. 7 months before he supposedly stamped that seal. Imani leaned back in the chair. Out in the bay, the compressor kicked on and hissed. She had a forged signature and a dead notary commission, and either one of them, on its own, was a problem for Garrett Mosley. Together, they were a hole you could drive Eli's tow truck through. But she'd been a CID agent long enough to know that catching a lie is the easy part. Proving it to a man who's never lost is something else. She started building the wall. She turned the office bulletin board into a timeline, the way she'd done it in 100 case rooms. Index cards, red string, dates on the left, names on the right. November 2023, the stroke. August 2023, the stroke. 21st, revocation. March 2024, the impossible signature. She pulled Eli's hospital records, his ophthalmology records, his neurology notes. She got the discharge summary that said in plain clinical English that as of that fall, her father had no functional use of his right hand and was legally blind. She found something else, too, late on the 9th night, when her eyes were burning and the coffee had gone cold. She'd FOIA'd the original loan application from Riverbend's bank, the one that started the whole chain. And there, in the bank's intake notes, was a line that made her sit up straight. Borrower waived in-person closing. Documents executed remotely and returned by courier. Her father, blind, half-paralyzed, who hadn't left Bream Street in 2 years, had supposedly executed a $90,000 loan by courier. No closing. No witness who'd actually seen him. Just paper in, paper out. She wrote one sentence on the last page of her green notebook, in small, careful print. She didn't say it out loud. She didn't tell her father, and she didn't tell Otis. She just closed the notebook and put it in her jacket pocket. I want to be straight with you about something here, because I've seen grown men with bar cards and corner offices fold under 1/10 of the pressure this woman was carrying. She had no firm behind her. She'd called 4 lawyers in Columbia, and every one of them, the second they heard the words River Bend and Garrett Mosley, found a reason they couldn't take it. Conflict of interest. Caseload. Ma'am, you don't want to go up against that man with no co-counsel. She had $1,100 in her account and a court date in 19 days, and a father who woke up 3 times a night asking if they were going to lose the garage. She didn't have help. She had a folder and a question, and she'd decided that was going to be enough. 2 days before the hearing, a white pickup pulled onto the gravel lot. 2 men in polo shirts got out with clipboards and a surveyor's tripod and started measuring the property line like the deal was already done. Otis came out wiping his hands on a rag and asked what they thought they were doing. Pre-development survey. One of them said, not looking up. Riverbend's orders. This is private property, Otis said. Take it up with the court Thursday. The man set his tripod down right in the middle of Eli's lot, on the gravel that old man had raked smooth by hand every Sunday for 60 years. Eli watched from the office window. He couldn't see the men, just shapes, just movement on land that had his father sweating it. That night his blood sugar crashed, and his pressure spiked at the same time, and Emily drove him to Latham Regional at 2 in the morning. They kept him for observation. She sat in a vinyl waiting room chair under a buzzing light until dawn, and somewhere across that sleeping town Garrett Mosley was sleeping just fine. It was in that waiting room, around 4, that the thing finally caught up with her. She'd held it together through the funeral years ago and 2 deployments and the drive home, and 19 nights of red string and cold coffee. And then a nurse walked past with a meal tray, and the smell of it, institutional eggs, the same smell as every chow hall she'd ever stood in line at with her brother before he shipped out, just took her legs out from under her. She put her face in her hands in that plastic chair and cried, without making any noise at all, the way you learn to cry when you spent 8 years not allowed to. Because she was 29. Because her father was upstairs with tubes in his arm. Because the only piece of her brother left in the world was a hand-painted sign on a corner lot, and a man with gold cufflinks was going to bulldoze it for a marina. And because she'd called everybody and nobody was coming. Otis found her there an hour later. He didn't say it'll be okay, because Otis was 71 and had buried enough people to know you don't say that. He just sat down in the next chair with his knees popping and put one big grease-stained hand on her shoulder and let her be 18 again for a minute. When she finally wiped her face, she said, "I've got him, Otis." Got who? Mosley. She pulled the green notebook halfway out of her pocket and pushed it back down. "I've got one question, and he can't answer it without losing." "Then why you crying, baby?" She almost laughed, because I'm allowed to do both. The morning of the hearing, fog sat low on the river, and the kudzu was wet, and the whole town smelled like clay. Amani rolled her father up the courthouse ramp in his good Sunday cardigan, the gray one. She polished his shoes even though he couldn't see them and couldn't feel the ground under them, because some things you do for the man, not for the situation. At the top of the ramp, Eli reached back with his left hand and caught her wrist. "Your granddaddy built that garage when the law in this state said he wasn't supposed to own anything," he said. His clouded eyes were aimed somewhere over her shoulder. "He signed those papers in the back room while the white folks used the front door. Nobody handed us that corner, Imani. Don't you let them take it with a pen." She didn't trust her voice, so she just squeezed his hand and pushed open the door. The Latham County courtroom was small and smelled like floor wax and old paper, low ceiling, one fluorescent tube flickering near the back, a ceiling fan turning slow and useless over the bench. Garrett Mosley was already at the plaintiff's table with his two associates, 3 men in 3 good suits, briefcases lined up like a catalog. On the defense side, a wheelchair, a manila folder, and a woman everybody in the room had already decided was a joke. There was one more person. A woman in the back row, 50s, navy blazer. A leather portfolio closed on her lap. She wasn't from Quincy. She watched the room the way Imani watched rooms, taking inventory. Nobody knew who she was. Not yet. All rise. The Honorable Judge Loretta Wexler presiding. Wexler was 60-something, silver-haired, reading glasses on a chain. She sat, scanned the room once, and you could tell she'd been doing this long enough to know which cases were going to bore her and which ones weren't, and she hadn't decided about this one yet. Riverbend Holdings versus Caldwell, Mr. Mosley. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and gave the judge the warm little nod of a man who golfs with everybody. The mortgage went up on a screen. Clean. Recorded. Eldridge T. Caldwell in confident cursive. A straightforward foreclosure, Your Honor. Mr. Munner. Caldwell took a loan, pledged the property, defaulted. We're simply asking the court to enforce a contract that's already settled. 15 minutes of the court's time, I'd imagine. Then the laugh. The counsel for the defense line. The room rippling along. Judge Wexler did not laugh. She looked at Imani over the top of her glasses. Ms. Caldwell, you understand these proceedings? Yes, Your Honor. This is a foreclosure action. The burden is on the plaintiff to prove a valid enforceable lien. Enforceable lien. We intend to show the instrument is void. The room changed. Not a sound, just a shift, like pressure dropping before weather. Mosley's smile stayed up, but it lost about 10% of its wattage. Proceed, Wexler said. Imani didn't raise her voice once. She'd been trained to do the opposite, that when a room expects you to shout, you go quiet, and the quiet pulls them in. Your Honor, I'd enter Exhibit A. Certified medical records from Latham Regional, dated November 2023, establishing that Eldridge Caldwell suffered a stroke resulting in permanent loss of function in his right hand and is, as of spring 2023, legally blind. She set the pages down. The signature on this mortgage is right-handed, fluid, and confident. My father has not used his right hand in 18 months. He cannot see the page he is alleged to have read and signed. This loan is dated March of 2024. She let it sit. Mosley recovered fast. 31 years of muscle memory. Your Honor, a stroke doesn't necessarily eliminate all function. Patients recover. And we have no handwriting expert here, no neurologist on the stand. We have a discharge summary and a daughter's theory. I move to exclude the medical records absent expert testimony. And here's the moment, the one where it could have all gone sideways, because Wexler leaned back and she looked at that medical file, and you could see her weighing it. Does the girl have the expert to make this stick, or is this all she's got? If she excluded those records, the strongest piece of the wall came down. Imani felt it. The way you feel a sight line opening up in the worst possible place. Her stomach dropped. And then she did the one thing she'd held in reserve, the move she'd practiced in the bathroom mirror for 19 nights. She didn't argue the signature. Your Honor, I'll withdraw the question of the hand for the moment. Mosley blinked. He loaded his whole counter against the medical fight, and she'd just stepped off the X. I'd direct the court instead to the notarization. Exhibit B, a certified printout from the South Carolina Secretary of State. She held up the single page her father's old printer had groaned out at midnight. This mortgage was acknowledged by Notary Public Curtis Pell on March 11, 2024. According to the state's own records, Mr. Sturate, Pell's notary commission was revoked on August 2, 2023, 7 months before the date on this document. Under South Carolina Code, an instrument acknowledged by a person without a valid commission is void on its face. Not weak, Your Honor, void. The gallery stirred. Otis leaned forward on the bench. The woman in the navy blazer didn't move, but her eyes did. Mosley was up before Imani sat. Objection. The notary's status is a technical irregularity, not grounds to. Overruled. Wexler said it flat and fast, and the word landed like a dropped wrench. "Sit down, Mr. Mosley." He sat. His jaw worked. One of his associates slid a note across the table. He didn't read it. Wexler took off her glasses, set them down, and looked at the clock. "This court will recess 30 minutes. We'll reconvene at 11. The gavel cracked, sharp in that low room. "Mr. Mosley, I'd use the time." "You want to know what a guilty man does with 30 minutes? Imani watched Mosley do it. He was through the side door before the room finished standing. Phone already out of his jacket, already dialing. She caught 4 words before the hallway swallowed him. "We've got a real problem." Now think about that with me for a second. We, who's on the other end of that phone? Sutter Holt, watching his marina evaporate? Curtis Pell, the notary who couldn't notarize? Somebody at the bank who processed a $90,000 loan for a blind man by courier? Whoever it was, Garrett Mosley, 31 years undefeated, golf buddy to half the county, was standing in a courthouse hallway, sweating through a $1,000 suit, telling somebody it had all gone wrong. Out in the corridor, Imani crouched down beside her father's chair. Her hands, the steadiest hands in the room 10 minutes ago, were shaking now. Funny how the body waits for the safe moment to fall apart. "Did we win?" Eli asked. "Not yet, Daddy." The woman in the navy blazer walked past them toward the water fountain. She paused, just for a second, and looked at Imani, not unkindly. Then she kept going. Imani filed it and let it go. She had 11 minutes and 1 question left. When court resumed, Garrett Mosley came back a different animal. When a man can't defend the document, he attacks the person holding it. "Your Honor, before we continue, I want the record to reflect that the defendant is represented by an individual with no legal license, no bar admission, no formal training of any kind. What we've heard this morning is not legal argument. It's amateur research dressed up in a blazer, a few internet searches, and a printout. I'd ask the court to weigh it accordingly." Wexler looked at him for a long, cold moment. "Mr. Mosley, the records Ms. Caldwell has presented come from the state's own certified databases and an accredited regional hospital. Not, as you put it, the internet." She let that hang. "Ms. Caldwell holds valid power of attorney. She has standing. Continue." Mosley's associate quietly stopped writing. "Ms. Caldwell," the judge said. "Anything further?" Imani stood, slow. The fan turned. The bad fluorescent stuttered in the back. She did not approach Mosley. She didn't need to. She stood right where she was, in the blazer she'd ironed on a kitchen table, and she looked at the most powerful lawyer in Latham County. "1 question, Your Honor." "Go ahead." She turned to face him. Mosley met her eyes with the look men give. A thing they've already decided is beneath them. "Go on, sweetheart. Ask your little question." "Mr. Mosley, if this mortgage is valid and enforceable, exactly as you've told this court, then why, at 7:48 this morning, did you file an amended satisfaction and substitution notice, replacing Curtis Pell's acknowledgement with a second notary's?" Silence. Not quiet. Silence, the kind with weight in it. The fan turned. Somewhere in the gallery a bench creaked as Otis gripped it. Mosley didn't answer. 1 second. 2. 3. "Mr. Mosley," Wexler said, "answer the question." He cleared his throat. "That was a routine administrative correction, a clerical substitution, nothing of substance." Imani didn't flinch. "A clerical substitution of the notary on a document you just told this court was authentic and complete as originally executed." She turned to the bench. "Your Honor, Exhibit C, the court's own electronic filing log, showing an amended instrument submitted by plaintiff's counsel at 7:48 this morning. 1 hour before this hearing, it quietly swaps Curtis Pell, whose commission was revoked, for a different notary and backdates the acknowledgement to 2024. She set it down, gentle, the way her father used to lay a torque wrench on a clean rag. If the original were genuine, it wouldn't need a new notary the morning a judge was finally going to look at it. Mr. Mosley amended this document at dawn because he knew the version he recorded couldn't survive this room. He didn't expect anyone to pull the commission records. He didn't expect anyone to check the filing log. She paused. One beat. He didn't expect us. Mosley came up out of his chair, red climbing from his collar. This is outrageous. I will not be cross-examined by an unlicensed. You will address this court with respect. Wexler cut him clean in half, and you will answer the question I've now asked you twice. Why was this instrument amended this morning? He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. 31 years of argument. 31 years of never once being told no. And Garrett Mosley stood in that little courtroom under that broken light and could not produce a single word. In the back row, the woman in the navy blazer reached into her portfolio and, very quietly, began to write. Judge Wexler didn't rule right away. She put her glasses back on and looked at the 4 documents laid out in front of her: the mortgage, the revoked commission, the medical file, the 748 amendment, like the corners of a puzzle that had already finished itself. Then she folded her hands. I've heard enough. The room went still. The court finds the lien presented by Riverbend Holdings invalid on its face and likely fraudulent in its origin. The acknowledgment was performed by an individual whose notarial commission had been revoked 7 months prior to the recorded date, which alone renders the instrument void. The plaintiff's own last-minute amendment, filed this morning to substitute that notary, is consciousness of fraud, and the court treats it as such. And the physical record before me establishes that the alleged borrower could neither see the document he is said to have read, nor write the signature attributed to him. She looked over her glasses, straight at Mosley. The foreclosure action is dismissed with prejudice. Title to the property at the corner of Bream Street remains undisturbed, with Eldridge Caldwell. She picked up her pen. Further, this court is referring this matter to the South Carolina Bar for investigation of professional misconduct by plaintiff's counsel and to the Attorney General's Office for criminal investigation of document fraud, forgery, and unlawful notarization, to include Riverbend Holdings, its principal Sutter Holt, and the notary of record, Curtis Pell. The gavel came up. We are adjourned. It cracked down once, and that sound went up into the low ceiling in the old wood and landed somewhere in the chest of every person in the room. For one full second, nobody moved. Then Otis Greer stood up. Slow, both hands on the bench, 71-year-old knees protesting every inch of it, and he started to clap. Just him, at first, 2 big, grease-stained hands coming together in a half-empty courtroom. Then the woman beside him stood, then the man behind her, then the whole second row, and it wasn't loud, and it wasn't a movie. It was maybe a dozen people in a small town clapping for an old man in a wheelchair. But it sounded like the whole world had finally turned around and looked. Ellie Caldwell sat there with his clouded eyes wet and his left hand pressed flat against his chest, over his heart, over the place where he kept his boy. Imani knelt down beside him. She didn't say anything. She just put her forehead against his shoulder, and for the first time since a flag-draped box came home to Quincy, she let herself believe they got to keep something. If you felt that, if the back of your neck went cold right there, do me a favor and hit that like button right now and send this to somebody who got laughed at before they ever opened their mouth. I'll wait. Because the part that comes next is the part Imani didn't see coming either. Garrett Mosley packed his briefcase without looking at anyone. His associates filed out behind him with their heads down. In the hallway, he passed Otis Greer standing at the water fountain, and Otis didn't say a word, just looked at him with 71 years of Quincy in his eyes, and that was plenty. Mosley kept walking. Within the year, his license would be suspended pending the bar's findings, and the Attorney General's office would unseal an indictment naming him, Sutter Holt, and Curtis Pell on 9 counts between them. Riverbend Holdings withdrew every pending claim on the Riverbend inside a month. The renderings came down off the Chamber of Commerce wall. Nobody in Quincy talks about Garrett Mosley the way they used to. The woman in the navy blazer waited until the courtroom had nearly cleared. Then she stood, smoothed her jacket, and crossed to the defense table. Ms. Caldwell, my name is Vivian Osei. I'm with the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. She set a card on the table. I came to Quincy today to observe an entirely different case on this docket. I watched all of yours instead. She looked at the folder, the red string timeline poking out of it. The green notebook. We've been building a file on coordinated property fraud against elderly black landowners across 6 counties in the state, forged instruments, a handful of the same revoked notaries showing up again and again. She paused. I've supervised investigators with 20 years and a federal badge who didn't connect what you connected in 19 days at a kitchen table. I'd like to talk to you about coming to work for us. Imani looked at her father. Eli couldn't see the card, but he could hear, and his face did the thing it hadn't done in 2 years. It came all the way open. Go on, baby, he said. Answer the lady. 6 months later, Imani Caldwell started as a federal investigator with the Civil Rights Division. The first file they handed her was the Riverbend fraud, and the second one was the 3 other Caldwell corner deeds in 2 neighboring counties, all stamped by Curtis Pell, all signed by hands that couldn't sign. Those cases are open right now. The garage is still standing on the corner of Bream Street. Otis's grandson runs the bays these days, and Eli sits out front in his cardigan in the morning, oxygen line under his nose, listening to the river and the compressor and the bell over the door. And every spring, somebody repaints the sign, whether it needs it or not. The photograph of Marcus is still bolted to the office wall, and under it, in old handwriting, this bay belongs to my boy. Nobody's ever moving that. Imani still carries the green notebook. It's full now. She bought a new one the week she started the job. Same kind, same size, and the clerk at the office supply store asked if she was a writer. No, ma'am, she said. I just like to be ready. She didn't have a law degree. She didn't have a firm or co-counsel or a suit that cost more than her rent. She had a father who taught her that nobody hands you the corner, a brother who taught her what it costs to stand up, and one question that nobody in that room ever saw coming. I chose this story because I am tired, bone tired, of watching people decide what you're worth before you said a single word. So if any part of this moved you, I need 3 things. First, subscribe, because this channel only exists because you keep showing up for stories like this one. Second, send this to somebody who's been counted out, somebody who got laughed at in a room they were told they didn't belong in. Send it to them tonight. And third, drop me a comment and tell me the truth. If it had been your family's name on that sign, your father in that chair, and not one lawyer in the county would take your call, would you have walked into that room anyway and asked the one question? And if you think you caught everything, go back and watch the first 3 minutes again. There's a detail in how she set down that folder that tells you she already knew how this ended. I promise you missed it. The thing I keep circling back to is how close Imani came to never walking into that courtroom at all. 4 lawyers in Columbia hung up the second they heard Garrett Mosley's name. $1,100 in the bank. A father who couldn't see the letter that was taking his life's work. By every measure the world uses to decide who gets to win, she'd already lost. And she went anyway. I think people misread what saved that garage. They want it to be one perfect question, like she pulled a rabbit out of a hat. It wasn't. The question only worked because of the 19 nights behind it, the red string on the bulletin board, the FOIA request nobody told her to file, the notary database she checked at midnight when her eyes were burning. Mosley lost because he was lazy and certain, and Imani won because she was neither. That's the whole machine of it. He assumed a young black woman from a town with one broken stoplight couldn't read a document as well as he could write a lie. He bet his 31 years on her quitting. Cause and effect. What strikes me most, though, is the part that had nothing to do with being clever. She could have cut a deal. Mosley would have paid to make it quiet, and a lot of tired, broke people would have taken the money and told themselves it was the smart play. She didn't, because her father raised her on a simple rule. You don't let them take with a pen what was built with a man's bare hands. That refusal to bend, that stubborn sense of what is and isn't right, is the thing the law degree can't teach you. The skill found the fraud. The backbone decided to fight it. And under all of it was a kind of grit that doesn't look heroic while it's happening. It looks like a 29-year-old crying alone in a hospital waiting room at 4 in the morning and then getting up and driving to the clerk's office at 8. Nobody claps for that part, but that part is where the case was actually won. So when I think about Imani and Eli sitting out front of that garage in his gray cardigan, and old Otis on his bad knees being the first one to stand and clap. I don't think the lesson is that good people get lucky. I think it's that being honest, being prepared, and being too stubborn to walk away are three muscles, and you build them the same way you build any muscle, on the days nobody is watching and nothing feels like it's working. Quincy almost lost its last black-owned corner. It didn't, because one woman decided the room that laughed at her didn't get to write the ending. That's a choice. It's always a choice.